And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers defeat Howard 86-77 in a game that, coming into it, you certainly hope is going to be better than a 9-point victory. Certainly the last thing that you want to hear toward the end of a game against the worst team on your schedule in your own house is it looks like Indiana is going to escape. But that certainly is what happened tonight, as, again, the Hoosiers win by 9 over Howard. And we're going to break it all down for you here on this episode of the Assembly Call. The bottom line, of course, is that it goes in the books as a W, the first W of the Archie Miller era, although, as we will discuss in this episode, I don't think he's going to enjoy watching the film too much, especially the defense in the second half. But before we get to all of that, let's start out tonight's episode as we begin every episode of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for tonight's banner moment, I want to take you back to the first half because, again, this is a game early on where I thought Indiana actually played a little bit better than the score indicated. The Hoosiers just really had trouble capitalizing on offensive opportunities, missing free throws, unable to take advantage of shots, despite the defense, I thought, being pretty good. And so Indiana was only up by 4 points late in the half. And then I thought Al Durham had a really, really nice sequence that propelled Indiana into the lead that they would then basically nurse for the rest of the game. So in one possession, he forced a travel with what I thought was a really heads-up defensive play in transition, because instead of just hanging back, he came and met the guy who caught a pass from a Howard guy who caught a pass and kind of bodied him up, and the guy turned and traveled because of that. And so it was a good awareness, a good effort play. This led directly to points as Justin Smith was able to score on the next play, and then the next time down, Al drained a three-pointer. It was his third of the half, stroked it really confidently. That put Indiana up 9, and it was a really important 5-point swing there in the first half to give Indiana control, put a little bit of cushion between the Hoosiers and Howard. And look, as the second half went along, even though Indiana got off to a good start, the final margin was 9 points. And so that little swing right there basically gave Indiana the lead again that they would nurse for the rest of the game. And I thought it was really indicative of the kind of heads-up play on both ends that Al had in the first half. His second half wasn't nearly as good as his first half, but that sequence in particular I thought was really impressive from him. All right, and our banner moment, as always, is brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based T-shirt and apparel company that is by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. And why should you check out their website, HoosierProud.com? I will give you 3 good reasons. Number 1, they have awesome designs. So in addition to the new officially licensed Indiana apparel they have, which you should, of course, check out, and the Assembly Call t-shirts, which they sell at HoosierProud.com, they have a ton of really unique, interesting Indiana-inspired designs. And so you should go to HoosierProud.com, check those out. Number 2, Hoosier Proud is very focused on philanthropy, and they support a number of Indiana-based charities with revenue from their t-shirt sales. You can go to the website and check out the charities that they support. And, of course, their generosity. Because you're a listener of the Assembly Call, you actually get 15% off your entire order at Hoosier Proud. Just go to HoosierProud.com, use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, and you will get 15% off, not just Assembly Call shirts, not just one shirt, but your entire order. A really, really generous discount. Check them out at HoosierProud.com. All righty, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team, which tonight is it's just a 2-man show for you tonight, as Ryan cannot make it. But Andy is here, and it's time for his Bottoms line, brought to us by IUtickets.shop, the URL to use when you want the best prices on IU basketball tickets. Mr. Bottoms, your Bottoms line.
Well, I think while we don't know the severity of the injury at this point, I think one of the big storylines to come out of tonight is the early injury to Juwan Morgan, who had his foot and ankle ice for the better part of the game, only played about 5 minutes. And his departure, as well as the existing injury to Colin Hartman, it really opens the door for Justin Smith. And tonight he kind of crashed through the door, 16 points, 12 rebounds, just played really, really well. Was active, seemed to really have a good idea of where to be when Howard was playing zone. And he got a lot of his points just by, being smart, playing in the right spot, and being active. And so I think that's certainly a great sign for his his IU career as it just gets rolling. But a good sign for IU as well, who may be without 2 of the veteran guys they have in the front court. And I know Smith was one of the guys that at some point in the offseason, we talked about who would be important in it. And I think I brought him up because there really just isn't, if Juwan Morgan got hurt and if Hartman got hurt, there just really aren't other guys to be able to kind of play that role. And Smith for tonight was really good. Obviously we can talk about the competition and those kinds of things, but for a guy in his second college game to go out and get a double and play as well as he did, I think is a positive thing. And quite honestly, if you look at the roster as a whole, by a pretty wide margin, the guys who played the best tonight were 2 freshmen and a sophomore. So I think that makes you feel good for the future and probably a little bit concerned for the present, because I think there are a lot of question marks, as I'm sure we'll get into the more we go through this game.
Man, I just feel so bad for Juwan. I mean, obviously we all hope that the injury isn't terribly severe, that it doesn't keep him out too long. My initial fear was, my goodness, if something happened to his knee. I guess I felt even a little bit relieved that he was putting ice on the ankle, just because it seems to maybe rule out a worst case scenario. But it's awful seeing that guy get injured so often. And that's why, we kind of joke about it. But I mean, every time he goes down, you just kind of hold your breath until he gets up. And unfortunately, this time he got up and he's limping. And, look, I mean, it's going to be obviously a huge blow to Indiana's season if he misses, any time, but especially given the opponent coming up next, Seton Hall, with what they have down low with Angel Delgado, losing Juwan Morgan, especially if Colin Hartman's not back, which we don't expect that he will be. Man, that's going to be tough to overcome.
Yeah, definitely will be.
So, maybe the first thing that we should talk about real quick, Andy, is just this Howard team. They are the worst team on Indiana's schedule. Is there any silver lining that they played George Washington close recently? Are they maybe better than we thought? Or is there really no way to sugarcoat that, and beating this team by 9, even with the fact that we missed a lot of free throws and all that stuff, is a result that should be concerning?
Yeah, I mean, they lost by 9 at George Washington. So, you're playing the same margin there. I think it's pretty hard to sugarcoat it at this point. I think that what they did make some low percentage shots, I guess maybe is the best way to say it at times. But, the reality is, particularly in the second half, IU was unable to build upon the lead. And like you said, there was definitely that, sluggish start component, but they felt like really they had started to, seize control. We're up by 10 at the break, and it felt like an opportunity to come out and really be able to expand on that lead. And build on it. And while the game never really felt like it was in doubt, they also never really put it away either. I mean, I don't know what the biggest lead was, maybe 16?
17. Indiana led 49-32 at the under 16-minute timeout. And if you go back to the last 4 minutes of the first half, it was a 24-9 run, which kind of started with that Al Durham sequence that I mentioned earlier. And it really felt like Indiana was just kind of going to blow the doors open and, okay, Indiana win this game by 40 like you expect them to. But, Howard just kept making shots, some of them very tough and contested shots, obviously. But also, I thought, and I don't know how you felt about it, again, I thought Indiana really came out at the beginning of the game with purpose, defending well, containing dribblers, and it just kind of steadily got worse. And I thought that's why Howard was able to come back, because it's almost like, Indiana got up by 17 and then kind of relaxed, and they weren't getting up on guys. They were letting Howard dribblers go wherever they wanted to, really weren't rebounding very well. I mean, there were so many defensive rebound opportunities where the ball just bounced and a Howard guy got it. And so I really think in particular, Archie's going to really be frustrated watching the second half, because I mean, almost all of the guys on the perimeter were just letting Howard's guards go wherever they wanted to. I mean, Devontae Green, I noted a couple times, was just, not putting up much resistance on defense. Josh Newkirk was letting his man get right by him. And that to me was really concerning, because that, you try and make some judgments from what you see in the exhibition games, and that is clearly seeming, kind of foolish. But you thought, okay, our ability to kind of get out there, pressure ball handlers, that's going to be a strength of this defense. And it is for little spurts, but we really don't know how to do it for 40 minutes right now. Yeah,
Newkirk, there were a couple in the second half where I can't even begin to understand what his approach was defensively. But I think I'll even take some offensive stuff at the beginning of the game. You're right. They came out with a real sense of purpose, were very active. The ball movement the first couple possessions was different than what we saw for the majority of the rest of the game. And it was like, well, I'm going to go out and prove a point, and then And then like you said, it was gradual in some ways, but in some ways it was almost by the time you get to after the first time out, it died off. And then I think in the second half really died off. I mean, the rebounding is a concern as you think about the Seton Hall game. Delgado's a fantastic rebounder. Just didn't really seem to go after anything on that end of the floor with a huge sense of purpose. And Howard had to score. I mean, I think they scored close to 50 points, maybe 50 points in the second half. I want to say I could be wrong about that. Nope, that's right, 50 exactly. I mean, that to me
that's insane.
Pretty unacceptable. And they took half their shots from three and they made 8 of them, but they got to the line 14 times, gave up 10 offensive rebounds in the second half. And that's, it'd be one thing if you came out in the first game and played really well, start to finish, but this felt like, well, I checked the box. I came out and did a few things that we talked about, but I just, I don't know. It was that was probably what frustrated me the most, was the inability to pull away, which was really born out of kind of indifference defensively and on the glass, and a complete inability to make free throws.
Yeah. I mean, the free throw shooting, 12 of 29. That for a while there,
as I tweeted out,
no, it's not good. For a while there, I tweeted out Indiana shooting worse from the free throw line than Josh Newkirk shot from 3-point range last year. And look, Josh Newkirk wasn't terrible from 3-point range last year, but when you're comparing those two numbers, that's really bad.
Well, and they made the last 5 free throws, as we talked about before we got started. So at one point, they were 7 of 24 from the free throw line, which is just, I mean, that's tough to do. I'm not gonna lie to you.
All right, you're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, breaking down Indiana's 9-point win over Howard. Let's talk about Robert Johnson a little bit, Andy, and we're going to get to Derron Davis, because I thought Derron did a lot of really nice things in the second half and, frankly, in the first half. I mean, it was a pretty good game for Derron. But
yeah, let's just save the talk about Derron, Al Durham, and any additional Justin Smith topics till the end, so we feel good about it. It's kind of like I
need something to look forward to.
Yeah, I don't let my daughter leave practice without making a shot. So this is the same. We have to save those for the end.
Yeah. So let's talk about Robert Johnson, who I thought had a very poor first half. I mean, I looked up in the first half. I think he had played 13, 14 minutes, had only taken 1 shot, just looked really tentative and really looked like he was overpassing in situations where a shot would have been the right choice. And I don't think this is the case, but at one point I even thought, like, is he just passing it and not shooting it to make some sort of weird point? Like, again, I don't think that's the case, but again, those are some of the shots I thought he was passing up. And I will say, to his credit, I thought he rebounded and played better in the second half, and he finished with a decent stat line: 14 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. He made, a couple of big threes there toward the end, which kept Howard at arm's length. So, look, I didn't think his defense was particularly great either, but, you saw him make a couple shots. You saw him kind of get going a little bit offensively, and even though it wasn't a great performance, that was at least nice to see.
I mean, I thought in the first half, I mean, he looked like a guy who had no confidence whatsoever and just simply didn't want to shoot. And I think even when you saw him take shots and even make shots in the second half, I mean, the one 3-pointer that he made on the wing that might have been the first 3 that he hit, I mean, he didn't catch it cleanly. Yeah. And even then, like, really hesitated. And even I think the second one that he made in the second half was kind of the same way, just a really slow release and kind of slow getting into the shot, like just looking for a reason not to shoot it. And he ended up
nothing like 2015 Robert Johnson that would just catch and shoot. I mean, and you just knew it was money.
Well, I mean, same thing. I mean, missed those free throws on the technical in the first half. He was one of, shot 4 straight free throws and was 1 out of 4.
And missed them dreadfully short, which is always a sign of no confidence.
Yeah, and it just seemed like a guy who didn't have a lot of confidence. Now, on the flip side of that is he made a couple plays going to the basket in the second half where he seemed completely comfortable on some, like a runner that he made late and just kind of some driving layups. Maybe that's what he needs to do to get going. But yeah, it was I mean, to me, he just looked like a guy whose confidence is shaken, which is, we talked about it after even some of the exhibitions and whatever, that he wasn't really shooting the ball very well, didn't necessarily shoot the ball well, even in the Hoosier Hysteria scrimmage that we watched. And our sample size of how he's been shooting is obviously pretty small compared to, the coaching staff and some of those kinds of things. But I think we had all expressed at least some level of concern about that. And I think, he certainly seems to lack confidence. So maybe he is able to, to build a little bit on that from making a couple threes in the second half. But I kind of said the same thing about when he made the layup in the first half. Like, sometimes maybe that's what gets him going. And then not long after that is when he went 1 of 4 from the line. So I definitely a concern as you look forward to him, with him, because, as we've talked about, he has to be a guy who plays confidently, does the right things, makes big shots, is willing to take big shots. And I think, we talked about who's going to have their ball in the hands at the end of the game. I think he seemed to be the de facto answer early on. But right now, I'm not sure that even he looks like he wants to do that, let alone what fans think he should or shouldn't be doing.
No, I mean, that's the irony of that Stephen Bardo graphic that went up there in the second half, talking about the Big Ten's best lead guards. And I mean, I think it just goes to show you, I mean, number one, don't take Stephen Bardo seriously. But I mean, if
that's always the big takeaway.
I know. But the thing is, like, if you've watched Robert, and look, he doesn't have bigger fans than you and me. I mean, but he's just a guy who hasn't seemed comfortable in that lead role. I mean, really thrived obviously 2 years ago when he was, a lot of times a third or fourth or fifth option and didn't get a lot of attention. But even last year, as guys started to get hurt and he started to move up the pecking order, it's almost like he kind of saw the pressure get to him a little bit, and he pressed a little bit, and he doesn't quite know when to put his foot on the gas and take it off. And I think a lot of, those of us who were much higher on this team coming into the season than the experts, a lot of that was predicated on Robert really taking that next step and embracing that role and being able to be a 15, 16-point scorer. And again, he scored 14 tonight, so the numbers at the end of the game were there. But I agree with you that kind of the eye test maybe didn't even necessarily match the numbers. And even a couple of the shots he made, you kind of cringed a little bit when he released it. And so, as we look at early season storylines that really need to reverse themselves for this team to come anywhere close to matching some of the potential that I thought that they had, he's got to get going. So hopefully something there in the second half. Sometimes when you're a shooter and you just see a couple go down, that kind of gives you confidence. And hopefully that can happen, because obviously he's going to have to play big at Seton Hall and Indiana's other big time games for them to have a chance. And the early season returns haven't been particularly good. All righty. Coming up on the assembly call, as we keep breaking down Indiana's victory over Howard, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers as well. That is next here on the assembly call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's 86-77 victory over Howard. And it is now time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed, which is delivered by iustore.shop, the URL to use when you need to shop for IU gear. And Andy, this is the point in the show when I want to talk about Derron Davis, because the story of the second half was basically that, when it became clear that Howard wasn't going to go away and Indiana wasn't really going to be able to push their lead up past 10, 11, 12 points, every time there was kind of a tense moment, Indiana went inside to Derron Davis. And seemingly every time they went inside to Derron Davis, something good happened. Either Derron bullied his way to the basket and got a bucket, or he found someone open for a good look, a couple of which were made, Robert Johnson's three-pointer being one of them. But there was one moment in particular that I thought was huge for a couple of reasons. And it came at a point in the game when it was 63-52, so that 17-point lead had dwindled down. Howard had slowly chipped away, and you kind of felt like Indiana needed to get something good going offensively just to kind of stem that tide a little bit. And so Indiana goes into Derron in the post, and, I mean, Howard just collapsed on him, as they did for most of the second half. He was triple-teamed, and Derron was really patient, didn't rush, and drove through the triple team and scored to give Indiana a 13-point lead. And look, Howard does not possess, an Isaac Haas or an Angel Delgado or anybody who, you're going to write home about as a post player or as a post defender. And so it's a game that Derron Davis should dominate. And so the fact that he did, especially in the second half, and finished with 17 points to lead the team, was an efficient 7 for 9, and it should have been a 20-point game, but he was 3 for 10 from the free throw line. The fact that he was able to do all of those in a game when he should do that, I thought was really important. And I thought that moment in particular was important, not just for the flow of the game, but also, kind of important in terms of De'Ron's growth, in terms of his confidence in staring down a triple team and taking it anyway in a big moment. And then obviously some of the subsequent possessions where it's not like he got overconfident and had to force the issue. When the passes were there to be made, he was patient and made those too. So I think we continue to see growth from De'Ron, and I thought that moment in particular was a very important one.
Yeah, I mean, one of those things where you see him playing really well, and then you look at the box score, and he had 15 points in the second half, which was, when you step back and think about it, makes total sense, but didn't really realize it was that much. And when, there was a huge difference when he went off the floor in that stretch. And it doesn't say that Freddie McSwain didn't play well when he came in for him, but there was definitely a huge drop off, and so much of the offense that they were able to get was facilitated by De'Ron attracting so much attention and either scoring in spite of it or finding other guys, as you said. So I thought he, kind of everything was on display. Blocked 3 shots in the second half, had a couple assists, didn't turn the ball over, and didn't foul at all in the second half in 16 minutes. I'll have to look for the whole game, but I think those are positive things for him. And again, as we continue to try to figure out what this team, is or is not going to be, he will assuredly be at the core of that. So, to know that he is able to step in and give performances like that, I mean, he's got to be the anchor at this point, and he certainly was tonight.
Yeah, and I thought another moment that I was going to mention, and this will allow us to talk a little bit more about Justin Smith, was early in the first half. Again, Indiana was really struggling offensively. Devontae Green scored the team's first 7 points. And really, I thought that was important offensive leadership from Devontae. Someone needed to step up, and he did it. But then, Indiana kind of went cold, missed their first 6 free throws of the game. And then there was a nice little sequence where Justin Smith scored 4 straight points. And that actually began a run of 12 straight points by the freshman, because Al Durham followed it up with 2 threes and a really nice coast-to-coast drive to the bucket. But I thought that the 2 scores by Justin Smith in particular were really impressive because, he's a freshman, playing against a zone. And I thought he really did a nice job of finding the open spots in the zone. On the first of the 2 buckets, he got the ball at the elbow and didn't hesitate, drove it right in. It was a really nice find by Al Durham, and he was able to score. And then, Justin also really worked the short corner well. And was able to, to find that hole in the zone and then go score. And so I thought that was important too, because again, it was a point in time where, offense just looked so hard for Indiana early in the game. And that's why I thought Indiana early was playing a lot better than the score indicated. And so it was really, because Devontae was able to step up and make some shots, and because Justin Smith and Al Durham, played beyond their years there in the first half, that was the only reason Indiana was able to get that lead. But I thought that was a really nice sequence from Justin. And as you mentioned, overall 16 points, 12 rebounds, a couple of blocks. He was a revelation tonight for Indiana. And if he doesn't step in with that kind of poise and that ability with Juwan Morgan out, look, you don't go into a game expecting Justin Smith to get 16 points, 12 boards. You might think he'll get 7 or 8. And if he only does that, you take 9 points off the board. It's only a 9-point victory over Howard. So those are really important points. And those in particular came at a really important time.
Well, I think some of the post-game comments are coming out now, and Archie talked about his IQ for a guy that young, and that definitely showed in the zone offense component, as you mentioned, and even as I had brought up earlier. I think he just knew exactly where he needed to be, made good decisions, didn't panic, to just turn and immediately fire the ball right back out, or turn and fire it, down inside to somebody. Really seemed to take the time to kind of survey what was going on, and where he could make plays for himself, he did, and where he could, kind of kick it back out and make plays for others, he did that as well. So I thought he was, just played a really smart game. And again, it sounds like, Archie was, non-committal about Juwan being able to play on Wednesday. I think that seems pretty unlikely in a relatively quick turnaround. I'm not sure there's a ton of benefit to, really rushing him back. So I have to assume that they'll be without both he and Colin Hartman, which means Smith is probably likely to draw the start, and will certainly be a whole new level of challenge for him. But he certainly showed tonight that he was up to the task, and again, did so many things well. And was another guy that things started to go poorly. It was like, all right, he needs to get back in the game. And that's, pretty high praise for a freshman, I'd say.
Let's talk a little bit about Al Durham too, the other freshman. Obviously, I spoke about him and his final line of 16 points, 3 assists, and 3 boards was really solid. Also impressive that he only had 1 turnover. I was a little disappointed in him in the second half, only in that I thought his defense lapsed a little bit. And look, he's a freshman playing 30 minutes. He was actually second on the team in minutes. But I also thought there were some opportunities for rebounds, and he just, kind of stood there and didn't really attack a few rebounds like he should have, and that led to some second chance points for Howard. But overall, for a freshman to come in like he did, and again, provide a lot of offensive leadership in the first half when Indiana needed a spark, the more you see him play, the more you realize why Archie is high on him. And Archie called him a very efficient offensive player and obviously a good defensive player, and you can see it. And look, how is Al going to hold up in a road game against Seton Hall? How is he going to do, against a team with athletes and players like Duke and against experienced guys in the Big Ten? That remains to be seen, but it was really nice to see him come out and flash some of the ability that we've been hearing about tonight. And again, without it, where would Indiana have been in the first half? He really made a lot of big plays.
Yeah, 11 points for him in the first half, and they were all huge. As you said, the offense was just flat out ugly, even though they were getting fouled a lot. Obviously that wasn't paying any dividends whatsoever, given the way they were shooting free throws. And so I think, he really came in. Apparently his spot for shooting threes is the corner. He hit a couple from there over the course of the game, and shot looked a little bit more smooth tonight, but still, I don't think that's going to be a great part of his game, but he can really, really attack the basket. And he finished around the rim, I think, with both hands and at different parts of the game. And so I think that's good, because that was one of the things, we harped on a ton last year about guys being able to finish at the rim, and particularly the younger guys. And I think he performed well in that area. And I think he can do a lot of things well. And quite honestly, if we continue to see performances from some of the guards as we did, the opportunity is there for a guy like him to really step in. And it sounds like he's played really well in practice, and that's earned him time in the game. And there's certainly nothing he's done in these last 2 games that suggests he should be playing any less than he already is.
You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, breaking down Indiana's 86-77 victory over Howard. Andy, it is time to go inside the numbers, and especially early in the season, the 2 big numbers that we're obviously going to be keeping our eye on, just as we look to contrast them with what we've seen in recent past from Indiana, is the defensive efficiency and the turnover numbers. For the turnover number tonight, according to the stats I'm looking at, Indiana's turnover percentage was 16.5%, which is, obviously not bad. 12 total turnovers. And there were some bad passes, but not too many of just the awful numbers. I do remember a few bad shots, some poor shot selection that you could, I guess, count as a turnover as well. But all in all, that number is certainly acceptable. But giving up 1.03 points per possession to a team like Howard, not good. As you mentioned, 50 points in the second half. And look, as Archie said in his post-game press conference against Indiana State, you're just not going to give up 90 points at home to a team like Indiana State if you're really digging in and playing hard and playing tough the whole night. And I think the same thing can be said tonight. I thought Indiana played a lot tougher in the first half, didn't in the second half, and that shows itself in those numbers. Yes, that number is inflated by Howard hitting some ridiculous threes. But at the same time, it's also inflated because of, some offensive rebounding opportunities that they created for themselves, some drives to the bucket that got Indiana, their defensive rotations all kinds of out of whack, and made a few of those 3-pointers that they made open looks. So I grant you that Indiana State and Howard made a lot of tough contested threes that we probably won't see. The law of averages will probably start to work in our favor on those. But still,
I sure hope so.
Yeah, well, yeah, hopefully, or it's going to be a really long season. But still, that defensive number is concerning. Not like long-term concerning, because I think we all expected that this was going to be a process, and these are guys that have some bad defensive habits, and that's not all going to change overnight. But just looking in the immediate term with Seton Hall coming up, it's extremely concerning.
Yeah, it definitely is. The rebounding is another concern. Again, going into, a guy like Angel Delgado, who's one of the best rebounders in the country. They give up 14 offensive rebounds, only out-rebounded them by only got rebounded Howard by 4. Not that rebound margin is certainly everything, but give up 14 offensive rebounds is troubling. And I think not necessarily just the raw number, but it was more of what you said and just the kind of lack of persistence in really going after them. The numbers can kind of shake out however they shake out, but I think just again, kind of using the eye test to look at how you felt about that. I don't think anybody could feel too great about how they did on the glass. So that's another concern heading into there. But yeah, I mean, I think giving up 31 3-pointers in the first 2 games or something like that. That was just a quote that Archie had that came out about that, which
it's ridiculous.
Which is crazy. And certainly there is a school of thought that 3-point percentage that you give up is not always a function of your defense. And so again, we're early on and who knows what will happen. Howard certainly made some tough ones and shot a ton of them. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a reason for concern, just the lack of ability to sustain the energy that they came out with. In the vast majority, this is the worst team on the schedule. And if you couldn't do that against them, I feel like we talked about this so much last year. You can't just turn it on. You can't just say, all right, well, I didn't play defense well against this team because I knew we could score whenever we wanted to and whatever else. Like, you can't just turn that stuff on. And no different than the turnovers a year ago. You couldn't just say all of a sudden I'm not going to turn the ball over. So I think that continues to be a concern, particularly in the second half. If they can't contain the ball any better than that, that's such a big part of the pack line, is while partly cutting off drives, but also really pressuring the ball. And I thought they did a pretty poor job of that in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought, again, we got up 17 in the second half, and I just think we stopped competing at the same level. And, Archie's mentioned it's going to be a process to learn how to play the way he wants to play for 40 minutes. And maybe it's part, conditioning and part mental. But either way, I thought Archie, called his team soft, mentally soft after the Indiana State game. Was very particular that it's not necessarily a physical thing, but just being able to dig in. And when the other team starts making a couple plays, can you dig in and get some stops and do what you need to do? And I guess kind of to Indiana's credit, there were points of time in the second half when, Howard would get it to 9 or 10 or 11 and Indiana would typically go make a play, more so on the offensive end than on the defensive end to kind of do that. But I think the other thing, to keep in mind really with any of the positives from tonight is, and this is something from Archie's press conference after the Indiana State game, is like, look, you can play in your exhibition games and kind of do some things and you cover up some flaws because you're able to do some other things, but it's more fool's gold. And so I think that's kind of the thing to watch out for in a game like this. What did we see tonight that can really move forward? Like, I thought Derron Davis in particular, some of the things that we saw him do, those are that to me is not fool's gold. Like, that's stuff that we've seen him do before. And I think seeing him be assertive like that and kind of take charge in the second half, that was really good. Justin Smith and Al Durham, we've seen freshmen and young guys play really big in exhibition games or against sub 300 Ken Pom teams, and it doesn't translate to better competition. I have no idea if this is, if what we saw from them tonight is kind of fool's gold or if it's something that portends good things for the future. We will see. What do you, Andy, do you take from tonight in terms of some of the good things that we saw? What do you think is legitimate and what do you think is maybe a little bit of fool's gold just because of the opponent?
I mean, I think Deron's performance is legit. I think it was some of the same flashes that we saw from him a year ago, and hadn't really had a chance to see too much of in the early going this year. But I think I will say one of the things they seemed to do, particularly early in the game, but it was a little bit more consistent, was a concerted effort to find ways to get him the ball in the post. And that's one thing we've, lamented for a while of, not being able to do that, not being able to do it often enough. And so I think that to me was a positive. Now, whether that part of it can continue, I don't know. But I think if he continues to get the ball that much, I do think he can produce and create opportunities for others. I'm a believer in the Al Durham piece of things at this point. I mean, given all the buzz around him from, kind of what Archie was talking about really leading up to the season and what we've seen in 2 games, albeit against, non-major conference competition, I think you can see what he likes about him and the pieces are there. Justin Smith, I'm a little bit curious to see. I think we've all liked the athleticism and those kinds of things, but I think he's about to enter a whole new world in terms of the amount of time that he's going to need to play against the caliber of opponent that he's going to play on Wednesday. So that one to me is there. So I don't know that there's a ton to hang your hat on that this team really is doing well at this point of the season. I will say getting to the free throw line has been good. Obviously, the percentage
as we
was
expected.
Not good. The percentage was not good tonight, but that's a positive. And I think tonight, 25 assists on 33 made field goals is a positive sign. I don't know. That seems unsustainable, obviously, just because it's a pretty high rate. But I think that was something to like. But I think a lot of that came from Derron Davis because, he may not have made the very first pass or the pass that made the shot, but the pass that led to the pass that led to the shot.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of that from him. But again, that all starts with him. Like, he's the anchor inside. They've got to find ways to get him the ball, make the defense react to him, and then let other guys play off of him and go from there. So I think there's a couple things that positive things that I think you can hang your hat on, but definitely not a ton because there just hasn't been a lot of consistency with too many of the players to this point.
Coming up on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 86-77 victory over Howard. We need to talk about a couple of the guards, Josh Newkirk and Devontae Green in particular. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game and every Thursday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also view all of our live broadcasts right on our homepage at assemblycall.com. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, breaking down Indiana's unimpressive, confounding, I suppose would be a few adjectives, 86-77 victory over Howard. Andy, let's talk a little bit about Josh Newkirk. And it feels a little bit like deja vu all over again here. It's early season, and my Twitter feed is just getting bombarded with Josh Newkirk tweets, people angry at Josh Newkirk, for missing shots. I did see a comment from Archie that he's not going to tell Josh Newkirk to stop shooting because it's one of the best things that he does, and that the law of averages will come around for him. And I just want to say that I fully agree with Archie Miller on this. I don't think that Josh Newkirk had a particularly great night tonight. I know, he finished with 9 points. He did have 7 assists, which is obviously good. It just, it wasn't a good shooting night for him. He was 1 of 7 from downtown. And I thought a couple of those weren't very good looks, but several of those were open looks. And I think, one thing that we've learned about Josh, we certainly learned this last year. I know someone asked me on Twitter, like, when has he ever shot well? Well, for a lot of the end of the season, like, go back and look at the stats. I know he struggled early, but he really found a way to make shots later. And he's a guy who, as a freshman at Pitt, shot over 40% from three-point range. He was somewhere around 37-38% last year, which is, certainly passable for a three-point percentage. And I think for an offense that is going to struggle to find things to hang its hat on, it could do a lot worse than Josh Newkirk taking open threes. And so if he gets those looks, he needs to take them. Again, the shot selection needs to be better. I thought his defense in the second half at times was atrocious, so that certainly has to get better. But in some ways, I thought this was a nice bounce-back performance from him after the Indiana State game. I soured on that some, watching him play Matador defense in the second half. But him shooting threes is just not something I'm that concerned about because I trust that he'll make those as the season goes along. Again, maybe not at a Jordan Hulls clip, but he's probably going to make him at a 38-39% clip. And for a team that's going to struggle with outside shooting, they're going to need that. So I agree with Archie on that. What were your thoughts on Josh Newkirk tonight?
Yeah, I'm just uneven, which like you said, is deja vu around that. I thought he distributed the ball relatively well. I'm kind of with you on the shooting, but at the same time, you're 1 of 7 on the night. At some point, they're a guy who he clearly was a guy that they were willing to lay off of and make him beat them. And he didn't do it. And I think, to your point, some of the shots are wide open and you can't, but for the same reason we're saying Robert Johnson was hesitant to take shots, you can't then say like, well, he shouldn't, we're getting on this guy for hesitating. And then by the same token, like getting on Newkirk for taking the shot. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy built into that, I think. But some of them were not great. There's at times you're open for a reason, but he certainly showed over the course of the end of last season that he can make those shots. So in that regard, I don't have a huge issue with it. I thought for me, the biggest issue I had was him defensively in the second half. I thought he was atrocious on that end of the floor.
Well, and you know,
and I think you just have to get more like effort and want to, and give a crap out of a senior guard at that point, to try to show these other guys the way to go. And that was probably more disappointing than the missed shots from my perspective.
Yeah. Let's talk about Devontae Green, who, again, I thought showed some good offensive leadership early when nothing was working. He came out and scored, 7 points early, did not score again. I thought the other positive from him is I thought he was creative in making post entries to Derron Davis. I think a lot of our guards can make a post entry pass if it's right there and kind of, perfect and everything is set up. Devontae is pretty adept at dribbling himself into a position, even, putting spin on the ball to kind of get the pass there into Derron Davis, which, sometimes for a program that has struggled to get the ball into the post, that's kind of nice to see. Although, you have to take some of the good with the bad there because he'll also try and force passes that aren't there. But I was actually, outside of those positives, I was not impressed with Devontae's play tonight. I thought he, again, tried to force some things. I thought defensively, he ended up being in foul trouble, picked up 4 fouls. And I thought a big part of that is because he was just really not competing on the ball like we've seen him. Like, we know that Devontae Green can be a better perimeter defender than we saw tonight. But I thought a lot of times he would, maybe take a step or two down in a stance and then was too easy to just become straight-legged and let his man get by him. And again, when you do that, it throws everything out of whack, and you got to be able to compete a little bit better, and I thought some of the body language things, just, again, he kind of looked like a sophomore, which is what he is. But I think, he's a guy that we all kind of felt we were going to be relying more on, especially when you saw what he, did in that first exhibition game, which is part of the reason why I tried to exercise some caution there and remind everybody that he's been a guy who is very inconsistent. And even within games, he's been inconsistent. But I expect more out of him, especially on the defensive end. And I just thought tonight, he didn't give it. And he wasn't the only one. A lot of the guards were like that. But I didn't think that he played very well tonight. And Indiana's going to need more out of him because he can do things on the offensive end of the court that just not a lot of other guys can do. But his head's got to be in the game. And I just thought for portions of tonight's game, I didn't think his head was really into it, at least from what I saw, from 1,000 miles away on my couch. So easy for me to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the one sequence in the second half where IU had, I think they'd scored on a couple possessions in a row and really had run some pretty good offense. And he came down just determined to take a shot, kind of went into traffic, took a bad jumper. And I'm not even sure the ball had hit the rim yet before Archie had turned to find somebody on the bench to come in for him. And then he kind of compounds that on the other end by just, really kind of not playing defense very well, gets a foul. It was almost like he wanted to get a foul because he knew he was going to go out. So just get it over with. And the, kind of long walk to the, the icy look of Archie Miller, who I'm not even sure he said anything to him as he walked by because I don't think anything needed to be said at that point. But
no,
yeah, I mean, I thought that sequence kind of summed up how outside of those first few minutes, I thought that sequence summed up his night pretty well.
All right. Where else do you want to go? I think another guy that we need to talk about here is Curtis Jones, who, again, we all kind of got excited about, saw some flashes from him in the exhibition season. But I thought tonight, was kind of more of the Curtis Jones from last year where, he's essentially just a catch and shoot guy, and had a couple of looks from downtown, made one of them, missed a couple of them. Did have a couple of assists, but for the most part, offensively, every time he got the ball was just looking to pass it really quick, not really able to create anything, no driving to the basket. And we kind of talked about him as a potential slasher. And so to me, him kind of reverting back to last year's Curtis Jones was disappointing. But I mean, look, I think it's maybe it's too much to expect, Devontae Green and Curtis Jones to be consistent producers yet. Maybe we're still at the point where we're just going to have to take what we can get from them. But hopefully as the season goes along, they can add a little bit more consistency. Because as impressive as he was at times in exhibition play, tonight, left plenty to be desired.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I don't know if it was the fact they were running zone a little bit more and he just felt uncomfortable. I mean, the only 3 shots he took were all threes. That's kind of my best guess at it. The other bench guy that we didn't talk about was Freddie McSwain, who I thought played pretty well again. 4 points, 7 rebounds. in just 12 minutes. So again, proven to be a guy who's really active. 0 for 4 from the free throw line. So he was not immune to what the rest of the team was from that part of the floor. But I think he continues to, again, he's not going to wow you. He's not a guy who I think is even, you're going to slide in the starting lineup if Juwan Morgan is out or any of those kinds of things. But I do think as you start to figure out, like, all right, what do we know about this team going forward? Maybe that could have been another guy that I slipped into my answer to your prior question.
Yeah. All right, you're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms, breaking down Indiana's victory over Howard. We did get to see a little bit of Clifton Moore tonight, obviously, in part, I'm sure, because of the injury to Juwan Morgan. He was pressed into action. And I thought, in the first half, I think Archie Miller had described him, as a guy kind of playing on ice skates in the offseason. That's kind of what he looked like in the first half. I mean, it was just kind of tentative, had a post feed go into him. It wasn't the greatest of passes, but kind of just went through his hands, looked a little bit, awkward out there, was a little bit out of position on defense. But I thought in the second half, he came in and he didn't score, but I thought the block shot that he had, and this was another one of those meaningful moments that you might have missed. It was 65-55 at the time. It's a 10-point game, and Howard was driving to the bucket, to where it looked like they might score, make it an 8-point game, and now you've got a little bit of momentum, and it's just like, man, this is really happening against Howard. But Clifton Moore made a really nice block shot, went to the other end. Robert Johnson scored. Indiana goes up 12, and so it was a really nice 4-point swing. So, I don't think Clifton really got the opportunity to flash any of the offensive potential that we know he has, and only got in there for 6 minutes. But I thought the block shot in particular was an important play at an important time. And just, again, another example of a freshman stepping up big for Indiana at a time when they needed someone to make a play.
Yeah, I mean, that was a nice play. I think I walked away saying, when maybe it's unfair because he's inherently going to be compared to what we saw from Justin Smith and Al Durham tonight, but it just feels like he's a ways off from really being able to contribute on any kind of regular basis. But the unfortunate reality of the front court situation at this point is that isn't a luxury that Archie Miller has. So he's going to get the chance to do that and hopefully prove me wrong. But yeah, he just seemed like he just seemed like it was going to take some time before he's really able to produce something off the bench.
So as we kind of deal with now the first official 80 minutes of Archie Miller basketball, it certainly feels like we're going to have to be more patient than we thought. I still stand by my opinion that come late January, come February, come March, this is going to be a tough team. A team that no one's going to want to play. And Archie has shown that in his history that his teams get better. Now, obviously, he's playing with another coach's players and guys who are going to have to fully buy into the system where they clearly are not right now. I think it's obvious after these first two games that we have to adjust some expectations. Don't ask me yet if I'm changing my pick for the Duke game. Let's just get there. But obviously, I don't have quite as much confidence in that pick after the first 80 minutes. I'm not insane. But what do you think is fair to expect? Because I mean, as I look at it right now, I know that, at times the guys look like, I thought defensively in the second half, like at times it looked like our guys' feet were stuck in the mud. Like we looked slow. And I think part of that is, you got guys learning a new system. They're probably thinking too much. But then another part of it is, do these guys really know how to compete on that end for 40 minutes because they haven't really had to do it. And so we're going to need to give them some adjustment time to play it the way Archie wants to play it. So, I'm trying to figure out like what is fair to expect from this group right now here early in the season. And how much do we have to adjust expectations for the rest of the season based on what we've seen right now? Or is it just too soon to know?
Probably a little bit too soon. I mean, we talked before about we just didn't really have a baseline on which to evaluate the team, and now we do. That's a little scary, I think, at this point for most of us. If I spoke for all of us, but I also think that so that lets you get some idea of where they are, and I think do we start to see the stretches of positive defense and that kind of activity level get a little bit longer and a little bit longer as we go through, because it was there in spurts tonight, but just not consistent enough, and just not good enough for large parts of the game. So I think that's you can start to do that. I think offensively, it's really hard to tell how things are really going to shake out there just from an identity standpoint. And I think we saw what it probably ought to be tonight with playing so much through Derron Davis. Whether this team can consistently do that or not remains to be seen. But I think he probably has to be the focal point of the offense at this point, and kind of let other guys play off of him, which I think can be effective based on the players that they have and some of those kinds of things. They've also got to be able to find people who can consistently knock down shots from the outside, though, because if he's going to attract that much attention, they're going to get open looks from three. They didn't shoot well from three on Friday night, and I don't think they did particularly well from a percentage standpoint, even tonight. So that's, I guess, 8 of 22. So I guess it's a little bit better than I thought, but I don't know that they need to be taking 22 of 61 shots from three anyway. Yeah, exactly. And so, some of those things, but we talked about this a little bit the other night. I think I likened it to like a default setting that some of these guys have, and they just kind of revert back to that in certain spots. And I don't know if that's why you see the freshmen performing well, because they're not being reprogrammed in the same way that everybody else is, and they can just come in and do things. But you've got a lot of guys out there who you can look at them and feel like you watch them process every situation and try to figure out what to do instead of playing instinctively. And the net result of that is some really uneven play, because if they can process things fast enough and make the right decision, things can work out.
It's a good point.
But they just aren't really confident in themselves to a point where they can consistently respond quickly to what's going on. And that's a scary thing to think about with a veteran roster, that you're probably not going to get out of the veterans what you thought you were going to get. And maybe that's some reason as to why, but there's no denying that Al Durham has looked like one of the better, the best, maybe 2 to 3 players on the team over the first couple games. And I have no idea if that's why, or if there's really something else going on, but there's that is,
I think I'm buying your hypothesis. I think I'm buying it.
It's both alarming and makes you feel a little bit good for the future that you have guys who are like kind of in on the ground floor, like figuring this stuff out and doing things on the fly. But it's, for the prospects of this season, it rightfully should scare the crap out of everyone, because, one of the things we hung our hats on when we started talking about this season was, we got a really veteran team and all those kinds of things. And now I'm not sure that means that carries the same positive connotation in a lot of ways that we probably thought that it did early on.
Yep. All right. Coming up in our final segment of this edition of the Assembly Call, we hand out our game balls, look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, and then deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's victory over Howard. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am JaJuan Morris here with Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's 86-77 victory over Howard. Andy, it is time for our game balls. We will go to you first. Who gets your game ball tonight?
I'm going to say Justin Smith. I'm hoping you're thinking what I am, and maybe we'll split the vote on this, because I think there's a couple guys that deserve it. But I'm going to say Justin Smith, if for no other reason than he was really thrust into a role that he had no way to expect that he would be in coming into the game, and he really responded without a hiccup at all as he went through. So a double-double for anybody is a big night, but for a guy who came in 5 minutes into the game and ended up playing a huge chunk of the game when that certainly was in no way his expectation, or if he was going to play as many minutes as he did, he was, I have to believe he assumed that it would have been because IU was winning by so much. So to really step in on,
he was awesome, man.
On short notice in 27 minutes and play that well, I think gives him a lot of credit. And again, one of the guys who, if you want to look for positive things, for this season and for future seasons, seeing him be able to step in and do that with not a ton of time in Archie's system is a pretty reassuring thing.
Yeah, there have already been so many sentences that I have uttered in these past 4 or 5 days that I never thought I would. But here's another one. Indiana might not have beaten Howard without Justin Smith. Not a sentence I thought I would utter, but probably a true one. With apologies to Al Durham, who I thought was terrific tonight, I have to give my game ball to Derron Davis. I mean, he was the go-to guy in the second half. He was the focal point of the offense. And I didn't even realize, I mean, Derron played 29 minutes. And this is a guy that, last year, I think the most he played was 21, 22 minutes. And obviously we know all about the conditioning and how hard he's worked to be able to play more minutes. And man, those were tough minutes there in the second half when a lot was being asked of him. And not only did he play 29 minutes, but he did not commit a personal foul. And so, for him to, to take those two weaknesses, conditioning and ability to stay on the court from that perspective and from a personal foul perspective in a game when his team absolutely needed him on the court, I thought that really showed a lot of leadership by Derron Davis tonight. And then you add in, being able to score 17 points on 9 field goals. And obviously, the free throw shooting was kind of a black mark on this game. And he wasn't great rebounding wise, but good enough. And then just some great passes out of the post. Derron Davis it's sometimes easy to get cute with these game balls and, you overlook sometimes the best player. But tonight I thought it was pretty clear that Derron was the best player on the court in the second half, and Indiana really needed him to be that. And so he gets my game ball for this game. Is that the other guy that you were thinking of, was Derron?
Yeah,
he was going to go with Al.
No, I think Derron, just because of as you said, how big a part of the game plan he really was, and how much he created for others was there. But yeah, it's kind of funny to think about how well Durham played, and he's probably the third choice. But I thought there was those three, and then a pretty wide gap between them and anybody else.
Yeah.
Like a really wide gap between them and anybody else.
Yes, I agree with you. All right, so let's take a quick look ahead to Seton Hall. Obviously, it's another pretty quick turnaround. Indiana's got Monday, Tuesday, and then we play Seton Hall on Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern time. This is one of the 4 big non-conference games for Indiana. I think it's a one that, a lot of reasonable people figured, probably could be a loss simply because it's on the road and this is a top 25 team and they've got an All-America candidate, but the degree of difficulty just skyrockets through the roof if you don't have Colin Hartman and Juwan Morgan. So we know that, but what kind of opponent awaits Indiana on Wednesday?
I mean, a really veteran team in terms of experience. They've got I think 4 or 5 seniors that are there. I think 4 seniors and a junior in their rotation that play the bulk of their minutes. So they've won both their games, although only beat Monmouth by 10 today. They've beaten Fairleigh Dickinson and Monmouth leading up to it. So both those games at home. But yeah, I mean, just a veteran team. Delgado is the headliner in terms of, All-American candidate, pretty much a double-double waiting to happen. So I'll be interested to see how he and Derron square off against one another. He had 17 and 11 today. So Justin Smith-esque numbers, some would say. So they've got him. Kadeem Carrington is a really good guard. Did not shoot the ball well at all in their game today against Monmouth. Missed all 6 of his 3-pointers. But he's a guy who's being asked to do a little bit more, run the point a little bit more this year than he has been in the past. And then Miles Powell led them in scoring today, at least with 18. So they've got a lot of different guys who can beat it. Desi Rodriguez, another really good player that they've got, who's a fairly consistent double-figure scorer. So not necessarily one guy that you can really hone in on. I think Carrington and Delgado are probably the 2 biggest names to watch, just because they get most of the headlines. Carrington's going to have the ball in his hands as much as anybody, and Delgado is going to be a big force inside. So a team that probably not. Most everybody's picking Villanova to win the Big East, and rightfully so. But I think Seton Hall is firmly in the mix to finish second in that league, and a top 25 caliber team who will be excited to host IU, I'm sure, and probably licking their chops when they see IU coming in the way they've played these first couple games.
Yeah, and without 2 important players.
Yep.
All righty, last call is coming up next. Remember that because you are an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts, or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout. That's HoosierProud.com. Promo code ASSEMBLY for 15% off your entire order. Christmas is coming up. It's a great place to get some Christmas gifts for the Proud Hoosier on your list. All right, I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms. Andy, let's wrap this one up. It is late there on the East Coast where you are, so it is time for last call. What do you got?
Well, it's been an interesting few days to see the season start. That's for sure. I think in so many ways, not what we expected, hoped for, or any of those kinds of things. But, hopefully someday we'll look back at this as the first win of the Archie Miller era and maybe view it as, I can't believe things started there. And so, my hope is that that's the case. And for as concerning as a lot of the things have been, for as frustrating as watching some of the veterans on the team play the way that they have over the first couple games, I guess I'll choose to focus a little bit more on some of those bright spots we've seen from the younger guys in terms of the Al Durhams and Justin Smiths and Derron Davises. in particular tonight, who, look, team didn't play well. They were in a much tougher game against a bad opponent than they thought they would, but those three were really the ones who kind of put it on their shoulders and brought it home. And I think, that's exciting that guys, regardless of the opponent, are willing to do that at such a young age and relatively inexperienced. In addition, you're inexperienced on a team of other guys who would be easy to defer and let those guys, take control of things and kind of ride or die with the other guys who were there. And I thought all three of those guys really stepped up and played well. And I think that bodes well for the future. Whether the future that it bodes well for is this season or next, I don't really know yet at this point. It's still too early to say. Just 2 games in, but I think there was definitely some positive performances to see from them and some positive things in spurts from the team that really look like it came out, determined to, right the wrongs of Friday night in the first few minutes of the game. They just were unable to sustain it. So as we start looking forward to, what's going to be a really tough game on Wednesday, things at times during that game, hopefully not for long stretches, are not going to go their way. And it's really our first chance to really test how this team reacts and, what they're going to try to do to be able to kind of shed that soft label that Archie put on them after Friday, and rightfully so. So I think that gives us something to look forward to see if the freshmen can build on this, and ideally that the veteran guys are pushed a little bit by that and that they can come back and step in. But we've certainly seen that Tom Crean teams perform well as the underdog, and IU will be a dramatic underdog, I would imagine, coming into Wednesday. So hopefully these guys can, of the holdovers from the Tom Crean area, hopefully that mentality as the underdog is one that stuck around a little bit.
Yes. And Brian made an interesting point in the chat, and this is important to remember as we all deal with the underwhelm from the first 80 minutes. But he said things can change in a season. We beat Kansas and North Carolina and then stunk last year, and maybe it's in reverse this year. And again, I think most of us expected the struggles to happen early and then for the team to get better. But I think what's been alarming is just the amount of the struggle and how certain guys have looked and how certain narratives that we had about how the season would go, how those have really kind of been blown open here early. And it's not that there isn't enough time to get that back. Robert Johnson still has plenty of time to have a great senior season and be the lead guard that we all want to see. And Devontae Green can certainly, become the consistent producer that we hoped he could, would be a role that he could step into. But through the first couple of games, we just haven't seen that. And so it probably does force us to, adjust our expectations a little bit. Remember that we're just going to have a little bit more patience. And to a certain extent, maybe we should have been doing that all along, because not only is it a coaching change and coaching changes, even, when you look at, some great coaches who have taken over at programs where they have ended up being very successful. A lot of times the first few seasons, it's a bumpy ride and it's not, a real clean, clear transition until that coach has, all of their recruits in and has had a few years to really build that foundation. And perhaps we didn't respect enough just how drastic the transition is from Tom Crean basketball to Archie Miller basketball, and how different it is, schematically and from a mentality aspect and all those things. So, look, it's going to be a bumpy ride. It's already been a bumpy first 80 minutes. But, like you said, Andy, you see some signs, some things to grasp onto that are positives. And that's probably the thing to do right now, is to focus on those, because I think, all of us who have really paid attention to this closely feel like the program is in really good hands with Archie. And it's going to take some time, especially for the guys who are holdovers, to transition into this new system. And we'll just have to be patient and keep hoping for the best. And hopefully Indiana can outperform expectations up there Wednesday night against Seton Hall, compete and give themselves a chance to win in the end. Because if they can do that, I think that would be a real confidence builder. And I think to a certain extent, that is perhaps what it will take. And Archie has mentioned this, now these guys are going to have success doing it this way to see it and believe it. And obviously they didn't have much success against Indiana State. And I don't know how successful they're going to feel about a 9-point win over Howard when they probably expected it to be a 40-point win. So I think that's really the next big kind of mile marker for me to watch for is where's the first big moment of success, where this team digs in on defense and it wins them a game, and doing things Archie's way really gets them going, because that could be a big turning point. And I know the odds are against Indiana doing it on Wednesday night, but that's the first opportunity for it to happen. And so obviously we will all be watching with great interest to see if Indiana can take advantage of that opportunity. And after the game, we'll be right here to break it all down for you on the postgame show. All right, that will do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that our live broadcasts immediately following every IU game are always available on our homepage at assemblycall.com and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And you can always catch up on demand anytime with our podcast. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com/join for our free email newsletter, which includes our 6-banner Sunday news roundups and our postgame analysis email, which I'm going to go right now as soon as we close this up. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again on Wednesday night for IU Seton Hall, the postgame show for that game. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.